Most people think life is a roll of the dice, random, chaos in motion. But if you stop moving, if you really watch the tape, something strange starts to surface. Patterns. The same ghosts, just wearing different clothes. You change the job, you change the partner, you even change the zip code, but somehow, the movie ends the same way. Money vanishes the second you start breathing easy. Relationships follow a script you never wrote but know by heart. Opportunities show up, look you in the eye, and then fold the moment you catch momentum. At first, you call it bad luck, then you call it a coincidence, then you just get tired. But after enough laps around the same track, a cold suspicion starts to itch at the back of your brain. Maybe the game is rigged. Maybe there's a blueprint everyone else got at birth, and your copy got lost in the mail. Because no matter how hard you grind, no matter how much hustle you put in the tank, you keep hitting the same invisible glass. And eventually you ask the question that keeps people up at 3 a.m. Why me? Why do some people glide through life like they're skating on ice, while you're out here pushing a boulder up a muddy hill? Why does every breakthrough come with a reset button? Just when the sun starts peeking out, the clouds move back in. A deal dies, a heart breaks, an emergency wipes out 6 months of discipline in 6 minutes. It's like the board just resets. And if you live that loop long enough, you start losing faith in the work. You start wondering if effort even matters. Because if the destination is always the same, why keep driving? But here's the truth that'll make you lose sleep. What if life isn't rigged at all? What if the system is actually working perfectly, and you're just running a program you were never taught to see? Take a guy like Adam. Adam is the poster child for doing it right. He's got the books, he's got the podcasts, he's got the rise and grind alarm set for 5 a.m. He isn't lazy, he isn't stupid, he genuinely wants a better life. And for a minute, it works. The bank account starts looking healthy. The career gets some traction. He starts thinking, okay, I finally cracked the code. But then, like clockwork, the board resets. The promotion goes to the guy who showed up late. The business idea hits a wall he didn't see coming. The relationship, the one that felt different, starts to rot from the inside out. Adam calls it life being life. But after 10 years of the same rerun, the bad luck excuse starts to taste like a lie. He realizes the pattern isn't random. It's consistent. Different faces, different places, but the same ending. It's the same movie, just with a different cast. See, we think life is a straight line, point A to point B, but life doesn't move in lines, it moves in loops. Invisible feedback loops that feel like personality. They feel like instinct. They feel like just the way I am. But underneath the skin, it's mechanical, it's code. We all have these internal programs, software installed when we were too young to know how to hit cancel. Programs about what we're worth, programs about what people like us are allowed to have. You didn't learn these in a classroom. You learned them at the dinner table while your parents argued about the light bill. You learned them watching how the adults in your life handled a win, or how they crumbled under a loss. Every sigh, every "we can't afford that," every door slammed in frustration. It left a mark, a rule, a boundary. And once that code is written, it runs your life while you're busy making plans. If you grew up where money was a source of trauma, where wealth was for other people, or the root of all evil, your subconscious builds a thermostat. You might want the millions, you might chase the bag, but if your internal program thinks money equals stress, the system will correct itself. Every time you get ahead, you'll find a way to sabotage the win, a risky bet, a sudden need, a distraction. It looks like bad luck to the world, but to your subconscious, it's just restoring the normal temperature. It's the same with love. If home was a place where affection was a roller coaster, where love felt like walking on eggshells, your nervous system starts to crave the chaos. The brain doesn't care what's healthy, it only cares what's familiar. So you meet 5 different people over 10 years, and somehow, they all end up treating you the exact same way. Different names, different smiles, but the same emotional script, the same ghost. And you tell yourself, I just have bad taste. No, you're just recognizing a pattern and calling it home. Once you see these loops, you start seeing them everywhere. In your health, in your friendships, in the way you react when someone cuts you off in traffic. It leads to the question that changes everything. How much of your life are you actually choosing? How many of your decisions are just the software running its course? If life is a series of feedback loops, then bad luck is just a fancy word for unconscious repetition. That's a heavy thought. It's terrifying, but it's also the only way out. Because you can't fix a machine if you don't know how it works. That's the moment Adam's life finally shifted. He stopped looking at the bad luck. He stopped blaming the rigged game. He looked at the pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can never unsee it. Which leads to a question that's uncomfortable to face. How much of your life is actually shaped by unconscious repetition? How many of your habits, your reactions, your preferences are simply patterns you inherited years ago and never questioned? Now imagine what happens when an entire digital ecosystem is engineered to trigger that response continuously. Infinite scrolling, notifications, autoplay, algorithms that learn exactly what makes you stop and stare. Every swipe promises something new, something interesting, something rewarding, and occasionally, it delivers. That occasional reward creates the same behavioral loop used in casinos. The brain starts anticipating the next hit of novelty, which makes it harder to tolerate slower forms of thinking. Deep focus, reflection, long-term planning, all the mental activities that help you examine the patterns in your life start feeling uncomfortable, boring, difficult. So the mind reaches for the easier reward, another scroll, another video, another notification, and before you realize it, nothing meaningful has changed. This is what some call the dopamine ladder. Each small stimulation keeps the brain climbing upward, without ever arriving anywhere. The ladder feels active, engaging, even productive, but it never moves your life forward. And the more time you spend climbing that ladder, the less time you spend watching the deeper patterns shaping your life, which means the loops keep running. Money patterns, relationship patterns, emotional reactions, career cycles, all continuing quietly in the background, unquestioned, unseen, until something finally interrupts the pattern. For Adam, that interruption comes through a simple realization. He notices something about his thoughts. They appear automatically. A worry, a memory, a prediction about the future. The mind generates them constantly, and most of the time, he believes them instantly. But one day he asks a strange question. What if my thoughts are not instructions? What if they're just events? What if they appear, move through the mind, and disappear? And that question leads him towards something most people never learn how to do: watching his own thinking. At first, it feels strange. Most people have never been taught to do this. We're trained to think, to analyze, to react, but nobody ever taught us to simply watch the process itself. Adam starts noticing something subtle. Thoughts appear constantly. Predictions, memories, judgments, worries about tomorrow, stories about yesterday. They arise automatically, like static in the background of a radio station nobody tuned. And for most of his life, he believed every single one of them. If a thought said something would fail, he assumed it would. If a thought said someone couldn't be trusted, he reacted accordingly. If a thought said money would disappear, he braced for the impact before it even arrived. But once he starts watching the process more carefully, he notices something that changes everything. Thoughts are not commands, they're events. They appear, they move through the mind, then they dissolve. Another thought replaces them, then another, then another. The mind is a story machine, generating narratives around the clock, whether those narratives are accurate or not. And the moment Adam recognizes this, something inside him shifts. For the first time, he realizes he doesn't have to follow every thought that shows up. He can observe it, examine it, question it. Instead of reacting immediately, he pauses, and that pause creates something he never had before: space. Space between the stimulus and the reaction. Space between the belief and the behavior. Space between the pattern and the outcome. And within that space, something remarkable happens. Choice returns. Not dramatic choice, not overnight transformation, but small, quiet adjustments. Adam starts writing down the beliefs he carries about money. He notices how quickly his mind predicts financial stress, even when things are going well. He observes how certain relationship dynamics immediately trigger familiar emotional reactions. He catches the urge to scroll endlessly the moment boredom shows up. Each pattern becomes visible, not because someone explained it to him, but because he started watching the system itself. And the moment you observe a system, you begin interacting with it differently. Instead of reacting automatically, Adam starts making small adjustments. He pauses before responding during conflict. He questions the assumption that every financial gain will eventually disappear. He starts protecting his attention instead of handing it over to whatever digital stimulus appears next. None of these changes are dramatic, but systems respond to small changes. Because systems run on inputs and outputs. Change the input, the output eventually shifts. Slowly, almost quietly, Adam begins noticing something different. The patterns start weakening. A financial gain lasts longer than expected. A conversation unfolds differently than it normally would. An emotional reaction appears, but dissolves before it turns into conflict. At first, the changes are easy to miss, but over time, they accumulate. And that's when the realization finally arrives. Life was never random, and it was never rigged. It was patterned. A network of feedback loops shaped by beliefs, attention, most people move through those loops unconsciously, reacting to whatever stimulus appears in front of them, repeating the same emotional responses, the same habits, the same assumptions, and because the loops feel familiar, they feel inevitable. But the moment awareness enters the system, the loop weakens, because awareness interrupts automatic behavior. You start seeing the belief before it turns into action. You start noticing the emotional trigger before it escalates. You start recognizing the pattern before it resets the board again. And once you see those patterns clearly, life begins feeling very different. Not easier, not magically perfect, but navigable. Instead of feeling like life is happening to you, you begin feeling like you're participating in the system consciously. You start noticing where your attention goes. You start noticing which beliefs are quietly shaping your reactions. You start recognizing when the mind is trying to replay an old pattern. And in those moments, you have a choice: follow the loop or step outside it. That shift might sound small, but it changes everything. Because when you stop running unconscious patterns, life stops feeling like chaos. It starts revealing structure, order, cause and effect. The same reality that once felt random begins looking more like a system of attention, a system of belief, a system of behavior interacting with the world around you. And that realization has been described in many different ways across history. Some people call it awareness, some call it consciousness, some traditions call it awakening, but at its core, it's simply the moment you stop being completely absorbed in the story and begin seeing the system behind it. You're no longer just the character inside the narrative, you're the observer watching the narrative unfold. And from that perspective, something powerful becomes possible. You can begin navigating life intentionally, adjusting patterns, testing beliefs, redirecting attention, small shifts that gradually reshape the loops that once felt impossible to escape. Because once you can see the system clearly, you can finally start playing it differently. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consciously. And that shift, from autopilot to awareness, from reaction to observation, from unconscious loops to intentional movement, is what people have been discovering for thousands of years. Not escaping reality, seeing it clearly, and once you see it clearly, everything changes. Stay lucid,